All right, we're in chapter 9 here. This is from the official NASA Procedures for Contact with Intelligent Extraterrestrial Life Manual. And this section is secrecy. If you are party to primary or secondary contact with IEL, it is imperative that secrecy be maintained. Once the press, and thus the public, finds out about the existence of the IEL, the responses will be immediate and very difficult to control. Therefore, all interhuman communication will be limited to members of the primary and secondary contact teams and NASA's Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. No one will be allowed to contact anyone outside of this circle, even family members, until the IEL can be properly assessed. Anyone who violates this directive is guilty of breaking federal law and will be immediately removed from the project and incarcerated. System failure. Lunar day 252, T-minus 24 hours to evacuation. Something's wrong with the air recycling system, Mom said. It's not providing as much oxygen for us as it should. Now that the cat was out of the bag, Nina had pulled her from the call with NASA in the science pod so she and Dad could break the news to Violet and me. We were all in our residence, seated on our inflated cubes. Kira and Dr. Howard were in their residence next door. Since none of the other kids had caught on to what was happening, they were still in school. Although I was pretty sure their parents were going to have to tell them the truth soon. The chances of Violet keeping the secret were awfully slim. The call with NASA, it turned out, had been about emergency procedures to shut down the moon base.
Why isn't the system making oxygen?
Violet asked. Well, it's making some, Dad corrected, just not quite as much as it should, and we don't know why. If we did, we could fix it. We've been trying to fix it, Mom said, for 2 weeks now. And you didn't tell us? I failed to keep the annoyance out of my voice. Well, there was a lot of debate about that, Mom said. A lot, Dad emphasized. But ultimately it was decided that it would be best for all the children here if we didn't tell them, Mom said, so you wouldn't panic or stress out. Oh, it was decided, I repeated, meaning it wasn't your decision? Well, there's no way some families could tell their kids and others couldn't, Dad explained, because if some kids knew, they would definitely tell the other kids. And Dr. Marquez felt that children might not be able to handle this. Dr. Marquez is a quack, I said. He's the moon-based psychiatrist, Mom said sternly, although behind her back, Dad made a face to indicate that he really agreed with me. NASA put him here to deal with things like this, so they listened to his opinion. However, and she glanced at Dad here and then looked back at us, it was never something that we were comfortable with. The point is, Dad said, we spent 2 weeks trying to figure out everything we could do to fix the system, or even figure out what's wrong with it. But we couldn't, and the oxygen levels have kept dropping. Not by much, Mom said reassuringly, only fractions of a percentage. However, if that continues, the air here will eventually become too weak to support humans.
But we're humans,
Violet said worriedly. We're going to be fine. Mom quickly moved to Violet's inflated cube and put an arm around her shoulders. Once NASA realized there was potential danger, an evacuation plan was immediately put into place. Rockets have already launched from Earth to get us. The first 2 will be here tomorrow. They've already launched? I asked. How's that possible? It wasn't on the news, and nobody texted me or anything. I was thinking specifically of Riley Bach, who had become a space fanatic since I was selected as a Moonie. She was always begging me for the latest updates. If rockets had left for the moon, she would have mentioned it. And if she had somehow missed it, at least one of the millions of other NBA fans back on Earth would have said something. No one on Earth knows, Dad said, not unless they work for NASA. The agency has been doing everything they can to keep this secret until we all get home safely. But they launched 2 rockets, I said. You'd think people might notice something like that. Well, NASA claimed they were merely satellite launches, Mom said. Satellites launch all the time. The people who live around the Kennedy Space Center don't give them a second thought.
And you're going to be here tomorrow?
Violet asked. Her concern over the depleted oxygen had already given way to excitement.
You mean all of us are going home tomorrow?
Mom and Dad didn't answer that right away. I realized why they were hesitating. Wait, I said, only 2 rockets are coming? Each of those only holds 8 people, and that includes the pilots. Right, Dad said. We can't all leave in the first wave, so some people will have to stay behind for the next 2 rockets. For how long? I asked. Another week, Mom replied.
So we might have to wait here?
Violet asked, growing worried again.
Without oxygen?
Mom tightened her arm around Violet. No, the families with young children are going to be the first to leave.
We are?
Violet asked. Well, NASA considers children's safety their #1 priority, Dad said. So our family will go with Kamoze and his parents in one rocket, while the Marquez family will go with Kira and her father on the other. I was quite sure that our priority had less to do with NASA's concern for our safety than it did with NASA's concern about the agency's image. It would look pretty bad if they allowed grown-ups without children to return to Earth before children, especially if something went wrong at MBA in the interim and the children died. I didn't want to bring that up in front of Violet, though. Instead, I said, and the Schobergs are okay with waiting? Mom and Dad looked at each other awkwardly and then back to Violet and me. The Schobergs don't know what's going on, Mom confided. They don't? I asked. Oh, they're going to have a cow when they find out.
They're going to have 4 cows,
Violet agreed. Well, that's why they haven't been told, Dad said. Although there's nothing they can do about this. Part of the contract they signed to come up here stated that this emergency return system very clearly. No matter how much they complain, they're going to have to wait. We're simply hoping to cut down the amount of time in which they can complain, Mom said. So when are they going to be told? I asked, and then thought to add, and when were you going to tell us? Tonight, Dad answered. We didn't want to alarm anybody until we had to. And you sent us to school? I chided. Our last full day on the moon on my birthday? Well, the idea was to keep you distracted, Dad said. Although we all felt you should be aware that your final evening here would be your final evening, so you could say goodbye to the place. And that's why you took me outside this morning, I asked. Yes, Dad said. It seemed like a shame to let you come all this way and never get the chance to play catch on the lunar surface. Plus, we didn't have a present for you.
What about me? Violet asked angrily. I never got to play catch on the lunar surface or do gymnastics or anything.
Oh, you'll get some time out there tomorrow, Mom told her, on the way to the rocket. Maybe you can do some cartwheels then.
Okay,
Violet said, her anger instantly gone. Dad stood suddenly. Hey, that reminds me, V. We need to check your spacesuit and make sure it still fits you nice and tight. We should probably do that now. Violet leaped to her feet, already excited about the next day.
Do you think I'll be the first person to ever do cartwheels on the lunar surface?
Well, I think Neil Armstrong might have done a few, Dad replied. And I think he did a round off, too.
Daddy, Violet said sourly, you're lying.
Maybe, Dad admitted, and then they slipped out the door, leaving only Mom and me in the room. I'm sorry we didn't tell you earlier, Mom said. Believe me, we wanted to. We didn't like keeping this a secret. That's okay, I assured her. And then, since Violet wasn't around, I asked, is it really safe here with the oxygen levels dropping? Well, we should be okay until tomorrow, Mom said, and even the people who have to wait for the next rockets will be fine, because after all, over half the other humans will be gone, so they won't be depleting the oxygen as quickly. In fact, they might even end up with more oxygen after we leave. But they still all have to evacuate? I mean, 1 or 2 people couldn't stay behind and keep the base going? Well, why do you ask? I looked around our residence again. Well, it just seems like a shame, abandoning this base after so much work. Well, leaving a skeleton crew behind has been discussed, but NASA decided that it's not worth the risk. What if the oxygen levels dropped to dangerous levels and it became too late to mount a rescue mission? Mom walked to our single small bureau and began taking clothes out of it, already starting to pack for the trip home. Space travel's hard, Dash. Harder than all of us hoped it would be. I know we have these dreams of leaving our galaxy and even visiting other planets someday, but that really might not be possible. Even if we could build a rocket that could travel that far or go warp speed, our bodies might not be able to handle it. We are acutely evolved for our own planet. Except for that tiny little spot, the rest of the universe is absolutely toxic for us. I found myself thinking about the conversations I'd had with Zan. She'd indicated that this was the case for species other than humans as well, although she'd never been specific about her own. When I'd showed her space movies like Star Wars and Star Trek, she'd always pointed out how ludicrous it was that every planet the heroes visited had the exact same atmosphere and gravity as Earth. She had originally found this hilarious, believing it to be a joke. Although it now occurred to me that no matter how much I had prodded Zan, she had never admitted whether or not any species could actually travel between planets. Besides, Mom went on, just because we abandoned this place doesn't mean it's a failure. We made it 8 months, and we could still come back. We? I asked, worry creeping into my voice. Well, I mean other people could come back, Mom corrected. Different lunar knots. Once NASA determines what's going wrong here and how to correct it, we could send some people back up to repair the base and get it going again. But I promise you, our family won't be coming. We've already done our time on this rock. I sighed, relieved, and then asked, have there been any side effects of having the oxygen drop? Mom paused in the midst of cleaning out the bureau like I'd caught her off guard. There have, I pressed, haven't there? Well, possibly, Mom agreed. I mean, it's nothing severe, but even a slight decrease in the amount of oxygen can have effects on people. Physically, it can be a bit harder to do exercise. Our hearts might beat a bit faster. We might find that we feel short of breath on occasion. I thought back to the past few days. I haven't felt anything like that. Well, you're young. Some of the adults have had issues, and then there's the psychological effects, which might even be stronger, like loss of concentration or lapses in judgment, increased irritability. Sounds like the Schobergs have had oxygen deprivation since they got here. I mean, I was only joking, but as I thought about the last few weeks, I realized that the effects of oxygen depletion had been evident. My fellow Moonies had definitely been more irritable with one another. I'd chalk that up to being trapped together in a relatively small moon base, but oxygen deprivation seemed to be an even better explanation. I also realized that I had been more irritable, especially with Violet. If you think the Schobergs have been bad so far, Mom said, wait till they find out that they don't have priority on the rockets home. I imagined what Lars Schoberg's reaction to that would be. He'd been clamoring to return to Earth for weeks, but there had never been available seats on a rocket for him and his family. Now, 2 empty rockets were going to arrive, and he still wouldn't have seats on them. He would go ballistic. I feel sorry for everyone who gets stuck here with them after we're gone. No kidding. Someone might end up dead. The moment the words were out of her mouth, Mom gasped. Oh my, that was a poor choice of words. I wasn't even thinking about the poisoning. I was just... She looked at me. Your father says you know the truth. Well, I know that somebody did it on purpose. I don't think you should investigate, no matter what Nina says. In a little more than a day, we're going to be gone from here. The last thing you need to do is put yourself in danger. You don't have to worry about that, I said. I'm playing it safe as can be until I get on that rocket tomorrow. Mom smiled and then returned to packing. It didn't look as though it would take her very long. We hadn't been allowed to bring much to Moonbase Alpha to begin with. I probably should have helped her, but I was still processing everything I just learned. MBA was losing oxygen. It was potentially dangerous, which was scary, but because of it, we were evacuating. I would be leaving the moon soon, more than 2 years before I was supposed to. The news was so incredible, it didn't seem real. And I also felt a pang of regret. It wasn't like I wanted to stay, but at the same time, the way it was all ending seemed wrong, like we'd failed. Plus, there was still a murderer on the loose. I wondered if that could have anything to do with the loss of oxygen. If a slight drop in oxygen ramped up people's irritability and impaired their judgment, then maybe someone who normally would have never considered murder might have suddenly done so. or taken a risk when they wouldn't have otherwise. Or maybe it was the upcoming evacuation that had forced someone's hand. Lars Sjoberg had sworn that he would destroy the lives of a lot of his fellow Moonies. All that stopped him from doing it already was that his lines of communication with Earth had been cut. But once he got back to Earth, there'd be little to stop him from trying. And it was possible that someone, if not multiple people, didn't want to give him the chance. Once half of us evacuated the next day, we'd be abandoning the crime scene, possibly forever. There was a better than 50% chance that the killer was heading back to Earth. 14 of the 25 Moonies would be on that first wave home, and there was even a possibility that the killer would be on my rocket with me. After all, Dr. Goldstein had been the one with the apple seeds, and now they were gone. And Dr. Goldstein had proven herself somewhat conniving before. Or maybe Dr. Iwanyi had done it. He hadn't liked Lars either. But on the other hand, there was an almost 50% chance that the killer would be stuck back at MBA with Lars, which might give them another chance to kill him, or give Lars a chance to get revenge. Whatever the case, it seemed like there were still a lot of scenarios in which something could go wrong. And as it turned out, things were going to get far worse than I had even imagined.